At a cathedral in central Dublin, an age-old ceremony is underway as a new priest is inducted into the church.
I offer you these symbols of your office and authority.
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, we meet to welcome a new dean of this cathedral church. It is a new ministry because Dermot brings particular gifts to our life and work together. We welcome him and Celia.
But in this land dominated by the Catholic faith, this is an Anglican ceremony. And the Reverend being installed as the new dean used to be a Catholic priest.
It came to a point where I had a real problem with preaching one thing and believing another.
Dermot Dunne stunned the Catholic community when he quit the church because he felt the rule of celibacy was outdated.
Celibacy should be a choice rather than an intrinsic part of ordination.
Dean Dunne's move marks a trend that's causing deep concern amongst the Catholic community here. The country once considered the Pope's epicentre of faith in Europe is running out of priests.
Compared to where the Catholic Church was 30 years ago, the state of the Catholic Church in Ireland is dreadful.
David Quinn is a religious commentator and a practising Catholic. He's been documenting the crisis in the church and is extremely worried about what he's seeing.
Ireland has the worst vocations crisis in the world.
Why?
People simply don't live within a sort of Catholic social universe anymore, where a very natural thing was, to become a priest or a nun. 160 priests died or retired, I think 2 years ago, and only 9 were ordained. So that puts the ratio and the numbers in perspective. So when people talk of a vocations crisis, that's an underestimate. It's not a crisis, it's a complete catastrophe. And as I say, there is nowhere worse than Ireland.
The number of vocations or people studying to become priests is so low that in the next 20 years, some say the number of priests in Ireland will drop nearly 70%. That's having a major impact on places like the Maynooth Seminary, the only college still open in Ireland that's devoted specifically to study for the priesthood.
Yeah, the numbers are down, of course, from the high of the 50s and 60s here in Ireland. We have less priests coming forward. Well, I suppose in the 50s and 60s, this university, St Patrick's College, Maynooth, would have 500 students studying for the priesthood, not only here in Ireland, but in also other parts of the world. But over the years, that has declined to now the point where we're just under 100 students here.
Now, only 9 priests were ordained last year. Father, what do you say?
I wish there were more. And I think there will be more, because what's happening is it takes 6-7 years for a priest to study and train. So the priests who were ordained last year began their studies at the height of the scandals here in Ireland.
Remains essential in any society.
The scandals, as Father Rush so quaintly puts it, is a reference to the blight of paedophilia that has rocked Ireland's Catholic Church, leading many in this pious land to abandon Catholicism for good.
So the scandals began to come to public consciousness in a big way probably from the early 90s, and probably for the whole decade of the 90s from then on, from let's say 92 or 93. I would say up until 2002 it was a rolling story in Ireland, and it was a very dominant story in Ireland, and it frequently made the headlines. There was absolutely gigantic public anger about the thing. Obviously a priest committing this offence is absolutely grotesque. 2 of the worst examples was, and they're both dead now, a Father Brendan Smith and a Father Sean Fortune. And they were multiple abusers.
Of children?
Of children. Well, children and young teenagers. And they were, not properly controlled, if that's the word, by church authorities. You see, that's the second part of the scandal.
Bit of a cover-up?
Well, That's the word that frequently gets used. I mean, and it's probably an appropriate word to use.
When Brendan Smith was led away, the cover-up and the public relations debacle that followed left many wondering whether it'll ever be possible for the Catholic Church to recover its former standing in Ireland.
I can understand where people are coming from, turning away from the church because of the instance of paedophilia. There were a lot of priests engaged. There were a lot of priests engaged in that in past years. I think one of the biggest problems is how the church handled the whole issue. But if there is a cover-up, and if there's a cover-up after a cover-up, I think people lose faith, and I can quite identify and understand with people.
Obviously, that probably would have affected the church. Young men wanting to go to become priests, or people wanting to go to church, go to Mass.
Given the percentage of population who are Roman Catholic in this country is now about 95%, when you had a very defined church who were giving a very defined faith and preaching a very defined faith, and this is my experience growing up as well, and everything was given, it created a safety. People didn't need to think for themselves, that they had a church who thought for them. But when the church starts admitting its humanity, for want of a word, and that the people within the church are human, that safety net is gone.
It wasn't a time to deal with vocations as such. You know, we had to deal with the issue of the scandals and those difficulties and the hurt and the pain, and it wasn't right to be doing a recruitment campaign in that sense at that stage when we're dealing with this very other important issue.
The ripple effect of an ageing priest population and a lack of new priests is now being felt in parishes as far away as Limerick. Here, there are so few priests that those who are left are forced to split their time moving between parishes. They call it parish clustering. I asked how they were dealing with the changes.
Our Limerick diocese isn't the only diocese that's involved in this. Actually, there is a huge number of dioceses throughout the country who have realised the need to begin to group parishes together as probably the principal way of addressing the change that's required.
But even with a crisis now gripping the Catholic Church, priests like Noel Kerwin are choosing to see parish clustering as a positive. There may be fewer priests, he says, but that simply helped to bring people together.
There was more a sense of the community, there was more a sense of the gathering, there was more a sense of the joy. So it's not just about It's not just about bringing numbers in. It's about being the kind of church that we are meant to be. It's not about doing things. It's about becoming who we are meant to be. That's at the heart of it.
Positive spin is one thing, but the reality is that Ireland's Catholic clergy is now so depleted that the church that once exported priests to the world is now having to import them, simply to bolster its ranks. This Mass is being led by a priest from Poland. He's part of a new league of foreign priests, now filling a growing gap in Ireland, as the country grapples with its vanishing local clergy.
The Church is trying to obviously address the issue, trying to ensure that people know what's happening, that the community of faith knows that there's a challenge out there, a call to be met, particularly for the numbers of priests. Even though we will have less priests than we had 20 years ago or 30 years ago, we'll still be able to give that fundamental service that the people want, our community of faith wants.
Is it going to simply try to soldier on, simply, using Irish priests? Or is it going to say, well, priests are plentiful in Africa now, or plentiful in parts of Asia, plentiful maybe in parts of Eastern Europe? So you would envisage a time when we will have to import priests,